get you ahead in the game. Both basketball teams battled IU Kokomo on the road over break in the first round of the River States Conference playoffs. Find out if they were able to survive and advance. Running this town, the track and field team participated in the NAIA National Tournament. Find out how the top runners did while in South Dakota. And going down to Florida, find out how our baseball and softball teams did down in the Sunshine State to start off the 2019 season. It's time to come on down to the Pioneer Sideline. Good evening and welcome to the Pioneer Sideline. My name is Mike Turk. On tonight's show, we'll be starting off talking about the men's and women's basketball team as they hit the road right before break to Indiana. The Pioneers and Cougars squared off in the quarterfinals of the RFC playoffs, looking to keep their seasons alive. To discuss how both the men's and women's team fared in the first round, we bring in a guy who covered them for the majority of the season on play-by-play, Colton the Bias. Colton, great to have you here this evening. Now, we're going to start off talking about the men's team. Now, how did that game go in Indiana for the Pioneers?
Well, Turk, this game did not go according to plan in any way, shape, or form for the Pioneers, resulting in a 65-100 loss in favor of the IU Kokomo Cougars. Now, you do got to admit, Turk, I mean, you were there to witness it. I mean, this team was ranked 25th at the time they played the Pioneers, and this game was only close for basically the first 5 minutes, and then Kokomo ran away with the game, starting with a 12-0 run in the first half. Now, the Pioneers were able to get it down to 22-16 at one point in the first half, but once again, Kokomo was able to find their mojo once again, going on another huge run, which resulted in the score 51 IU Kokomo and the Pioneers 37 in the first half. And by that time, there was really nothing that the Pioneers could do with just costly turnovers, not making pivotal shots when they needed to, results in their season ending in Indiana. But you do got to admit, Turk, I don't think we have not seen the last from this Pioneers team, knowing that they only won 4 games last year overall. I think this season can be a great stepping stone for Coach Lewandowski and this Pioneers team in the future, even though they are going to be losing some seniors such as, I believe, Kyle Carrington and Daniel King. So I think it's going to be interesting what we're going to see with this Pioneers team next year.
You just mentioned how they were doing in the past, my few years there at Point Park. They were pretty good my freshman year here, but the past 2 years, they've missed the playoffs. Now, can you just talk about the impact Joe Lewandowski has had here as head coach, and was it more of an impact from his standpoint or as the players as their own?
Well, I think you can look at it both ways, Turk. I mean, Coach Lewandowski was a motivator on the bench for the Pioneers this year, and also I think some of the players really stepped up their game, such as Chance Wright, Mark Shahady, Daniel King, always making pivotal shots when they needed it. Always Cortez Allen doing a great job getting down low in the paint and playing solid defense. So I think you can look at it for both ways. But I think this team will be in good hands. With Coach Lewandowski if he is signed to a long-term deal with the Pioneers.
Now, who are you looking up to step up next season? You mentioned Mark Shahady. Honestly, he's one of my favorite players to watch this past year. His ball handling skills are out of this world. But who personally are you looking forward to step up next season for the Pioneers?
It's kind of hard to say, Tur, because there were just so many great players on this team. Yeah, but like you said, if you look at Mark Shahady and even Chance Wright as well, with 2 underrated players for this Pioneers team. So those are 2 players that I am excited to watch. And also, you also got to look at a Tudor Shelton, who came from the team during the season. So I think those are three players that you can watch for this Pioneers team next year, but it's just always so hard to decide because there's just so many great players that really stepped up their game this year.
No, I think we can both agree. It was a pretty impressive season for the Point Park men's basketball team. A lot of people here on campus didn't have much faith in them. It was a whole new season, new head coach, and they made it back to the playoffs. So it was an impressive season for them, definitely not a failure as they continue to rebuild. But now let's switch things over to the women's basketball team, who's also missed the playoffs here recently. But they made it back this season, also got the chance to travel to IU Kokomo to battle the Cougars team as well. It was looking good there first, Colton, especially at the end of the first half where you had some faith, but they kind of lost their steam. What happened in that one?
Yeah, just like you said, Turk. I mean, with a strong first half, 24-15 with the score after the first quarter. And also, they also had the lead with, it was a 37-31 at halftime. But like you said, Turk, during that third quarter, IU Kokomo was able to turn the tide, going on a 22-4 run. But I think that the big thing was just turnovers. I think the Pioneers just had too many turnovers in that third quarter, and they also could not make pivotal shots when they needed it. And also, they attempted a comeback in the fourth quarter, but that third quarter just came back to haunt them too much, and as it resulted in a 77-60 final score for IU Kokomo.
Now, looking at this past game, as the final games finally for Sam Weir and Caitlin Smith, who have been such pivotal players here at Point Park University. What's the future of Point Park women's basketball looking like, do you think?
Oh, I think the women are going to be fine, Turk, with a Coach Grenick still at the helm of this team. I think he was personally one of the reasons that this Pioneers team was able to do so good this year, because as you can see with his passion that he has on the bench, and also I think the Pioneers are going to be fine. And also I think the big reason of that is because of Michelle Burns. I think she made pivotal shots all season long when the Pioneers needed it. So I think they're I think they're gonna be in good hands as well, along with the men's team.
Let me ask you a quick question though. Michelle Burns didn't play in that game. She had an injury. You think that game turns out maybe a little differently? Michelle Burns is in there?
I think so, Turk. Knowing that she can make threes when they needed it, and she's also a really good defender too. So, I mean, that's something you never know, but that's something the Pioneers really can't dwell on. All they really have to do now is just focus on next year.
Colton, thank you very
so much, Turk,
you did a great job on play-by-play this past year. So now, when we come back after the break, we're going to tell you how the track team performed at Indiana in South Dakota, at National. All that and more coming up right after the break.
All right, we're ready.
Oh, no. You are right here.
Is the win really necessary, guys? We need the win. Okay.
You go today. You're awful. You. Awful.
Okay, I need someone to make me laugh.
Where's Wyatt? Wyatt's always late, duh.
I'm here. Jealous?
Get out of my way. Stop.
Cool. Okay. And now we're smiling. There's a lot of noise going on. 3, 2, 1.
Here at the Pioneer Sideline.
We covered the real sports.
On another season, the Penguins are just getting started with the regular season this week.
Pioneer Sideline.
Welcome back. The track and field team took the long journey to South Dakota over break to compete in the NAIA National Tournament. To discuss his experience at the race and how the rest of the team did, we welcome in Xavier Stevens to report more. Xavier is usually a guy who's here for interviews, but today he's doing a track report. He was there personally. Now, Xavier, I just want to ask you, what was your experience like up there in South Dakota?
It was pretty cold. I think the warmest it was like 14 during the week, but it was in the negatives with the wind chill, but it wasn't too bad.
Now, I know you're indoors and all that, but since you said it was so cold, does that by chance affect how you go through your daily routine up there of stretching and all that, warm-ups beforehand?
Yeah, I definitely had to dress up warmer. I definitely had to dress warmer when I ran outside, so that affected a little bit because you can warm up inside, but there's not too much space and there's a lot of people walking and running around, so it's like either go outside or kind of get caught up inside. So.
Now, I want to ask you, what kind of events were you personally participating in? Since we have you here this evening, we can get this one-on-one experience now. And what kind of schools were you going up against?
Yeah, I ran the 4x8 and the 1,000. We ran against St. Mary's. There's like Wayland Baptist usually is good, Aquinas, a few other schools, Indiana Tech.
Yeah. Now, we asked our track correspondent, Nick Asiski, a few weeks ago about how scoring went in track and field. Couldn't quite give the right answer to that one. He wasn't quite sure, but I was told that you were able to explain more about how track and field scores went about.
So yeah, in the finals, the top 8 score, so it goes, the winner gets 10, 8, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and then 1 point based on what position you get. Obviously, like first gets 10, second is 8, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then that only counts in the finals. So like you got to make, if there's a preliminary race, you got to make the finals and then you don't score until then.
Okay. Now going over to the women's side, I mean, on the women's side, there's this one girl who's kind of good on your side. I can't remember her name. Nobody remembers her name, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Anna Shields, my goodness, possibly one of the best Point Park athletes to ever step foot on the university. Can you just talk a little more about her and what it's been like to work with her for these past few years?
Yeah, Anna's been amazing. Just watching her run is fun, and she's so humble. And like especially watching the women's DMR, like in the final, they were back in 8th place, and then she got them to 2nd. So yeah, that was fun to watch.
Who else has stood out on the other side, on the women's side, excuse me?
Yeah, definitely Reba Bartram, like Alyssa Campbell stood out. She's only a freshman, and she's done pretty well. She qualified in the 3K and the women's DMR.
Now, looking forward to next season, what kind of things do you think you want to accomplish personally and as a team as well?
Definitely qualify more, get more people to qualify for nationals, indoor and outdoor. Hopefully for cross next year we can take the whole team, and hopefully I can get higher than 8th this time.
Now, we know here at Point Park, Coach Kelly Parsley was fired recently before the NAIA National Tournament meet. Did he by chance reach out to you before or after the meet?
Yeah, he reached out to, I think, most of the athletes on the team. He reached out to me before my race, after my race, and it was different without him, but he was still in our thoughts and congratulated us and wished us good luck going into the races.
Now, what is your opinion on how Coach Spizak did here with you guys? Kind of handed that position out of nowhere. Did he adjust well to what he was given?
Yeah, there was a few hiccups at the meet, but I think Coach Jim adjusted very well. He handled them. Him and Coach Kramer handled them. Like the women's, I don't know if you know, the women's DMR, there was a hiccup. They got disqualified because of one of the rules, but Coach Jim got them back in the final, and there was an issue with our flight, and he handled it very well.
Now, you said women's DMR. Could you explain what that was?
Yeah, the women's DMR is a distance medley relay.
Okay.
It consists of the 1,200, 400, 800, and the mile. And each leg, Anna was on the mile leg. In the finals, Alyssa Boyd was on the 800 leg. Reba Bartram was the 12, and Taylor Selich was the 400 leg.
Well, Xavier, thank you very much for joining us on today's episode. And congratulations, man, on a fantastic season here at Point Park. Like, seriously. Now, baseball season is in full swing. How have the nationally ranked Pioneers played to start off the season? We have all that and more coming up next, only on the Pioneer Sideline.
I know just the trick. Bippity, boppity, boop. Much better. Guys, Samir Nesby, and I'm outside of the Benedum Center right now. So in just a few moments, we're going to go inside the Benedum Center to talk to Trevor Dion Nicholas, who plays the genie in Disney's Aladdin. I'm Samir Nesby giving you the theatrical scoop for the Berg. Hey guys, so now inside the Benedum Center with Trevor Dion Nicholas, who plays the genie in Disney's Aladdin.
Welcome back. The baseball team started off the 2019 season ranked number 16 in the NAIA. Their talents were tested early off as they flew down to Florida for 8 games in just 4 days. They then traveled back up north to West Virginia this past weekend for a few games against their conference opponent, West Virginia Tech. To tell us how the teams played down in Florida as well as West Virginia, we welcome in Taylor Spirito. Now, Taylor, we just found out today the Pioneers have actually dropped from the national ranking. They're no longer ranked. What is going on with the Pioneers here early on in the season?
So they actually split their spring training trip 4-4. They did come away from the West Virginia Tech games 2-1. Not as good as we're used to seeing this Pioneer baseball team. I mean, they absolutely dominated last season. They had 9 losses on the year, and right now they're 6-5. Which is so much more than they had at the beginning of the season last year. They had 1 loss in Florida last year, 4 this year. They're really just going, I don't want to say off of a cliff because it's still early in the season, but they're dropping off kind of heavily here. I'm really looking forward to see how they're going to be able to pick this back up.
Now 47-9, 23-4 in conference play to finish off last season. Do you think they're a little overrated to start off now that we're seeing them drop that drastically in the rankings?
I mean, yeah, they had such an impressive season last year, but you also have to keep in mind that they lost a good majority of their roster to graduation last year. They lost 7 of their starting lineup in the batter's box, and then they lost 3 of their pitchers to graduation, as I mentioned earlier. Now, their pitching staff was so dominant last year. It was the talk of, I don't want to say the NAIA, but at least just Point Park. It was just, our pitching staff was so good, and the fact that they lost 3 of their pitchers, not as much as their starting lineup in the batter's box, but it's still going to hurt them a little bit, and that's starting to show here.
Now, do you have any positive and negative things you could say about the Pioneers here to start off so far? I know you touched on pitching as well, and just what has been going on here early on?
So to start off negatively, like I said, they had a few losses, more than they're used to at this point in the season. Some of them were fairly close. Some of them were fairly not close. So those are just some things to keep in the back of their heads as they keep going throughout the season. Obviously, don't dwell on those losses, but keep in mind what went wrong and then build off of that. Now, some positives is they have some new players stepping up with the absence of all those players who graduated last year. Cole Haru is back, awesome in the on the pitcher's mound, awesome at the plate. He's going to continue to dominate, and he's still fairly young. Keep going at this, and he's going to continue to impress this season. And then one name I do want to point out is Tyler Doby. He has 2 home runs on the season already, 1 in WVU Tech and 1 in Florida. Now, he's a transfer, and he's a transfer junior. So that means that we have him for 1 more year after this, just looking forward to the future. But he's already continuing to impress this season. So I would be on the lookout for both of those guys. And then, of course, Tyler Huber. He won both games against WVU Tech on the mound. And then, of course, you got to keep Nick Beardsley in mind. He was such a backbone to that pitching staff last season, and he's currently getting his arm evaluated. He might need surgery. We just have to keep that thought in the back of our heads.
Well, it's very early on in the season, excuse me, Sailor. But thank you very much for coming on and reporting on that. Now, let's switch things over to the other side. The softball team also traveled down to Florida to kick off their 2019 season. The Pioneers had to play a couple games down there, and to discuss more about those softball games, we welcome in Brooke Stake, reporting on softball for the first time this season. Brooke, how was the team looking down there in Florida?
Well, they did pretty decent. It was their first time playing outside since they've been practicing in Green Tree, and the first 2 days they just had practice and they worked on their plays, but they played 2 games a day for 10 games total, and they won 3 and lost 6. Their last game actually didn't count though because they played the Czech Republic and they went against Olympic rules, so that's pretty cool. But most of their games were pretty close, and the teams they played, were used to playing outside year-round, so I think they did pretty decent for being outside first time.
Now we got to see them a little bit down in Florida. What are some things you think they might need to work on before they start off conference play coming up here soon?
Yeah, well, I asked senior Shannon Davis on the team multiple questions about, what they think they need to work on as a team too on whole, and she said they need to start making the positions more solid in the infield because the team has lost, a majority of their starters. So the team also has, more than one person fighting for each position on the field. Right. So she suggested the team can use improvement with their hitting, and since they have a very well rotation with pitching, the team can start improving their mistakes there. So.
Now you're talking about pitching and hitting there. I want to go back to a question like that. You have seniors Ashley Ignema, who just won RSC Pitcher of the Week just the other day, Tiffany Edwards, who's also a senior, and junior Katie Tarr. Pretty dominant staff, arguably one of the better ones in the RSC. Now, if the Pioneers can't get their hitting rolling, do you think the Pioneers can kind of put all the weight on their pitching staff coming up to potentially make a run?
I think they can hold their own because they've proved it the last 2 years, looking back on their stats. And in Florida, they showed that they're ready to play in conference this year. If the team is not having the best field day, that their pitching staff can, help keep the game going. So.
Yeah, now there's a couple of new players on this team and also a couple of returners. Anybody standing out to you so far here for your last question?
I think players to look out for is freshman Carissa Shakiris. She helped carry the team in Florida, and she helped win a game early for the team. And also freshman Taylor Goldstrom. She had some really good hits down in Florida, and Taylor playing on the soccer team with me, she's very athletic, so I know she'll be really good on the team this year too.
That's good. Thank you very much, Brooke, for joining us today. Now, when we come back, we'll tell you what the Penguins have been up to lately, along with a complete breakdown of all the major moves at the end of the NHL trade deadline. We'll be right back after this break.
The United Student Government at Point Park University, working since the 1970s to solve the issues that matter to you. What concerns do you have about the university? Student life, safety, food service? Send us an email to studentconcerns@pointpark.edu or stop by our office on the 7th floor of the Student Center. You can also attend our weekly open meetings on Mondays at 3:15. Follow us on social media at USG_PPU for more. The United Student Government, by the students, for the students.
The Point Park Sports Network, bringing you live coverage of Pioneer Athletics on Stretch Internet, the home of the River States Conference and the NAIA. Subscribe today for complete access to the Point Park volleyball, baseball, basketball, and soccer teams. Watch live and on-demand broadcasts, and don't miss a minute of Point Park Athletics. Head to pointparksports.com/live for broadcast listings. The Point Park Sports Network, your streaming home for Point Park Athletics.
3, 2, 1.
Please visit our website. Please, it's a nice website. Please visit our website. Please.
If you have ever watched television, whether accidentally or on purpose, YouView is for you.
Welcome back to the Pioneer Sideline. The beginning of March can sometimes be a quiet month in Pittsburgh sports outside of the Penguins. But with Antonio Brown making headlines every morning and the Pittsburgh Pirates starting off spring training, it gives us a lot of material for our reporters here at Sideline to work with. For updates on how the Penguins and Pirates are doing in their games, as well as an update on whatever Antonio Brown is doing this week, we welcome in Robert Berger for more details. Rob.
The Pittsburgh Penguins have had their ups and downs this season, but they have had a big win on Saturday night against the Montreal Canadiens, with the final score of the game being Penguins 5, Canadiens 1. This put them back in a wild card spot for the Stanley Cup playoffs, which are quickly approaching. Right now, the Penguins have had 5 players out due to injury, though, and those players are Brian Dumoulin, Ryan Rust, Chad Ruhwedel, Olli Mata, and Chris Letang. So the Penguins are currently working on finding a way to continue to play well while having so many players out. And moving on to football, Antonio Brown, he has been making headlines for quite some time now, and it's clear that the Steelers, they're ready to trade him away, and many speculate that he could be traded as early as this week. The team is supposed to pay him a roster bonus of $2.5 million on March 17th, but the Steelers have publicly addressed that they are not willing to pay Brown that money, according to 247sports.com. And now over to the Diamond, the Pirates have started spring training down in Bradenton, Florida, and they have gone 4-5 in their first 9 games. The biggest headline has been third baseman Jung-Ho Kang, who has played 5 games this preseason and already cranking out 3 home runs at only 12 at-bats. The return of Kang is definitely a player to watch out for this season, and the Pirates are only a month away from the start of the regular season. Turk, over to you.
Well, thanks, Rob. Now, the trade deadline in the NHL occurred recently, and there was a lot of action towards the end of February. To tell you about some of the biggest trades to go down in the NHL, we bring back in Nick Kosiski on a national report. Nick.
Thanks, Turk. The NHL trade deadline hit on February 25th, and oh, were trades made. A total of 22 trades happened on February 25th. Ones that stand out include the Philadelphia Flyers trading a player they had since 2011, as well as a favorite of the fans. Flyers forward Wayne Simmons was traded to the Nashville Predators in exchange for forward Ryan Hartman and a 2024 round draft pick. Another big trade was the Ottawa Senators trading forward Mark Stone and Tobias Lindberg to the Vegas Golden Knights for Vegas Knights defenseman Eric Brandstrom and forward Oscar Lindberg. Now on to the MLB side of sports. Spring training games are still taking place until the end of March, since the official season was announced by the MLB to start on March 28th. And as baseball begins to start, hockey comes to a close. But hey, don't worry, because hockey season still will be running through early April. Currently, the Tampa Bay Lightning are leading the NHL with a total of 104 points for the season. The Calgary Flames are in second place with 89 points.
Now, Nick, you also told me before the show about a little extra news you might have about Olympic sports. Could you explain a little more about that news you told me earlier?
Oh, man. Yes, oh yeah, for sure. So, the 2020 Summer Olympics will be happening in Tokyo, Japan, and they just announced that smoking and vaping will be prohibited at the events. So keep that jewel in your pocket. Game-changing. Yes, indeed, Turk.
Real quick, one more time, Nick, before you go. What about that Penguins trade that just happened recently?
Penguins, we traded Tanner Pearson. We also traded Sebastian D. And I know we got Gabranson. And Gabranson, I think he's going to fit really well with the team. We got him, I believe, from the Florida Panthers. If not, we got the other guy whose name I forget, my bad. But I just really think that the Penguins need to stop making trades, though, because we make too many trades. That's when we start to get a little bit messy because we're not used to the lines that we have. But we'll see what happens.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to look at all that just happened in regional and national sports with Antonio Brown here about to be traded away. We'll see what Le'Veon Bell is going to do, who he's going to sign with. It might be the Arizona Cardinals. It might end up being the Indianapolis Colts. We do not know, but Nick, thank you so much for coming on for that national report. Now, that's going to be all the time we have this week for the Pioneer Sideline, but be sure to join us next week at the same Pioneer time, the same Pioneer channel, and the same Pioneer Sideline. Thank you. Good night.